Team, I just thought I'd provide you with a bit of insight into how we assess the fire safety assessor level 2. And this is the spreadsheet, which is the template. And I've got up an assessment for this particular building. I'll try and keep it as generic as possible, but I thought using a student's submission would be helpful for people. So we're on the first page here. If you look down the bottom, we're on the building details. And all this looks pretty good. We've got our occupancy details here. He's followed the instructions of these small notes. It's really important that in each section you use the prompts and put into these fields what we need. The only criticism I have here, well, no real criticism here, except down here in section 2. We've got to put email correspondence that relates in general to the correspondence, but more importantly, notification of the building assessment, so your booking email, and there are links here to the booking email. However, the documents related to the assessment, fire safety schedule, and that'll be a link to the fire safety schedule. However, this is communication. We need communication relating to you telling your customer what's going to be required from them to be given to you for this assessment. And the reports provided may well be reports that the customer has that you need in order to undertake this assessment. I do understand that a lot of people are doing both the test and inspect and the assessment of the measure. However, you really need to take your test and inspect hat off and put your assessment hat on and look at your assessment of any given measure based on you not having tested and inspected it. That'll give you a good idea of how you're performing in the test and inspect realm. So anyway, we'll do some further videos on these sections here. We've already got one small video on section 1 and 2. In this particular case, the emergency lighting is the measure we're looking at. I can see this is filling quite well. We've got a BCA 2016, clause E 4.2, 4.4, and AS 2293.1, 2005. So that tells me quite a bit. When I look at and go to that particular measure, the installation date is unknown. Well, that's not really true. The standard says that we're assessing this based on a 2016 version. So regardless of the installation date, we're going to assess this based on what we've said down here. The system description is not really correct here, because the installation, what we should put up here in the details is the actual date of installation is unknown. However, we're going to assess the installation based on the 2016 BCA and the 2005 standard. The system description here, it should be a description of the type of system that's been installed. So emergency lights have essentially two types of systems. You've got your central system and your single point system. So in here, we really should be saying that it's a single point system consisting of various types of emergency lights and exit signs. And it clearly says that here, provide a brief description of the type of system being assessed using common industry terms and relevant points that may differentiate one from another. That would say down there, really these things need to be updated a bit so you can see the whole note. But essentially, it doesn't matter what system it is, whether it's a hydrant system or whatever. What type of hydrant system is it? Is it a pump system? Is it just a mains water push system? Does it have a booster valve on the front? So this really just needs to be a basic description of the system that you're inspecting and testing. The performance would be this section here really should be in the performance, because the performance of this system needs to comply with BCA 2016 and the Australian Standard 2005. Oh, sorry, that's correct. It does say that. Sorry about that. Third-party contractor. Okay, so we've got one nominated there. The baseline data. Baseline data is not available for this assessment, done based on fire safety schedule. So there's no plans available. And the equipment schedule, we've linked to the equipment schedule there, and the service records, we've linked to the service records there, which is quite good. Got a couple of pictures up here, which is helpful. Now, I just want to point you to the first three sections of this section 6. They're grey, and we need, for the purpose of the unit of competency and assessment, we need you to follow these prompts very carefully, because we need evidence of you identifying equipment on site based on a plan. And although we don't have a plan in this case, this area here should say, well, if we don't have a plan, then how am I identifying whether the system is compliant or not? Do I even need a plan? So if I went through this the way I would do it, first of all, evidence of identifying equipment locations compared with the locations on the plan must be provided. See notes in the comments. All right, so this is really a review, not a survey. It's a review. You can use survey. Survey is an inspection. We need to review it, but I'm happy with survey there. The reference relates to the item benchmark of performance. In most cases, it will be really need to, I'll just edit this note and bring it down. However, it may be related to the documentation that it needs to be validated. Performance, for example, a manufacturer or test procedure or engineer solution. So what we're looking for in here is a reference to the performance of the system. So this particular line item is all about plans. What document references the need for plans in either the BCA or the Australian Standard? Now, we really need to have these standards open, and we needed to do a desktop audit. So let's go to AS2. This is 2293.1, Design and Installation of Emergency Light Systems, 2005. So this is where these documents are where we need to identify what the regulations or the standard says about performance. We need to understand that just because emergency exit light systems, or any system for that matter, just because it works, because it's operating and functioning, doesn't mean it's performing. And I'm going to give you some examples here of what I mean. Just got to find it here, because and this is literally a desktop audit that we would do. Don't want the scope. Reference to performance. So I'll just come down here and we'll eventually find the requirement for a plan. Duration of operation. So the duration of the operation of the lights, which is a part of the test and inspect, is important. So what does it say about the duration? It says here it needs to, it references 2293.2, which is the test and inspect standard, and it says it cannot be known when the normal lighting will fail. It is essential for their correct performance that emergency escape lighting and exit signage systems are regularly maintained there. So this standard says you've got to regularly maintain it. It says that on the initial service, it's got to last for 1.33 times the applied duration and the duration needs to be 90 minutes. And most people know that the duration needs to be 90 minutes, but 2293.1 says that's a performance requirement of the light. So therefore, we need to test and inspect records to verify that performance. But that's it. So test and inspect records can verify performance. I want you to really take notice of this. The general requirements of operation arrangements and control. Upon the failure of electrical supply to the normal lighting in an area, irrespective of whether or not it's illuminated, each relevant emergency escape luminaire and exit sign shall be energized from its emergency apply in accordance with 2.3.2. It goes on to say that when you've got discharge lamps and the discharge lamps have a time that they have to re-energize. So say a discharge lamp type of light goes out and it takes about 2 minutes for it to actually come back on again. It says here that the system should compensate for that by allowing the emergency lights a little time frame within the design to leave them on for a couple of minutes after the power is restored. Sensing supply, single point systems. In single point systems, the failure of the normal supply to any final sub-circuit supplying lighting to a designated area shall cause each self-contained emergency escape luminaire and exit sign in the area served by the sub-circuit to be automatically connected to this emergency light power. Now, what this is saying is that you can't put the emergency lights and exit lights on its own circuit. It needs to be associated with the general lighting circuit in the area. So just by turning the test switch on and proving that the lights come on for 90 minutes doesn't prove that it's connected to that particular circuit. At least once we have to turn off the lighting circuit via a circuit breaker for a minute or two or 30 seconds and have a look and see whether the emergency lights come on when that when the lighting in that area is turned off. That's a performance requirement. And this is where we find these performance requirements. So design of systems. Required locations, exit signs of appropriate type complying with 2293.3, which is another emergency light standard, shall be installed in locations determined as necessary in accordance with the building code. And we'll go back to the building code and see where does the building code want these lights. For externally illuminated exit signs, you should read that. That's quite an interesting read. It talks about the images and signs and colours that there should be, the size of the pictorial elements. If you've got the number 24 on the bottom of exit signs is there because at 24 meters, the pictorial sign needs to be 150 millimeters. So if you're standing in a corridor and you're more than 24 meters away from a light, and that's the only light you can see, then that pictorial height of that sign may need to be bigger. It's really important that we understand what the performance, this is all the performance of a system. Illumination, the Building Code of Australia requires exit signs to be illuminated at a level sufficient for them to be clearly visible at all times when the building is occupied by a person having the right of legal entry to the building. Mounting heights. Like there's so many buildings that don't comply. The exit signs shall be mounted no less than 2 meters off the ground and no more than 2.7 meters. I don't know how many times I've seen exit signs mounted above glass panels of a door, which are clearly above 2.7 meters. These are the things that we need to be putting on our checklist. What are we looking for when we're determining performance in accordance with 2293.1? So there is required locations. I was reading this a little bit earlier. There is a section in here that says you need to have a plan. That you need to survey the building per the plan. Protection against overcurrent. So there are all types of lights and design. And when we go down to our appendixes, we'll see that the lights need to be located in particular areas for particular reasons in particular systems. So there's no reason that an assessor can't look at these pictures and say, are these lights installed in this way? Okay, so I think I've made my point here. If we go back to the building code and have a look at the performance requirements of a building code for this system, let's bring that up a little bit. Deemed to satisfy provisions for emergency lights. The requirements of emergency lights are, this is where they're supposed to be and where they're supposed to be installed, like 2293 just mentioned. Exit signs and I won't read all this to you, but essentially this is the stuff that we need to be putting on our checklist in section 6. If we're saying that an emergency light complies with E4.5, we should read what E4.5 says, and we should assess the performance of that system based on E4.5 exit signs. Need to go back up to the the performance requirements overall of emergency lighting and exit signs are to facilitate the safe evacuation in an emergency, a building must be provided with a system that ensures a level of visibility sufficient to enable exit paths of travel and exits and any obstacle along the path of travel of exit to be identified. It activates upon instantaneous failure of the artificial lighting system, and that's where 2293 says it's got to be associated with the general lighting in the area that the light's installed, and it needs to be to the degree appropriate to the function and the use of the building, the floor area of the building, and the distance of travel to the exit. To facilitate evacuation, the suitable signs and other means of identification must be to the degree necessary to provide identification, location of exits. So they must be clearly visible to the occupants. And then it goes on to where the light should be. So we really need to have this a checklist built so that all of these things that we're looking at in the performance standard that the fire safety schedule says we need to have, these things need to be there. These things need to be on our checklist. So when we come down here, sorry, let's go to the audit report. This reference here needs to be the NCC 2000. The NCC E4.2 to 4.4, and it needs to be AS 2293.1. Is it critical we have a plan? Well, it may or may not be. I don't believe it is critical you need to have a plan because you've got the requirements of the building code and this standard you can use. So you can measure the efficiency of the installation, whether there's enough lights or whatever, and where the lights should be, based on the information that you get. It's a little bit harder because you've got to figure it out for yourself. At least if you've got a plan, it's easier. And then in here, as the fire safety schedule equipment location confirmed by surveying with test results and location. Well, if you survey that, you surveyed against what? Surveyed against the annual report? No. Surveyed against what? It should be surveyed against the reference. So that statement's okay that you've surveyed the you've walked around and you've looked at it and you've said that the lights are in the right spot, there's enough of them, they're capable of performing, they're capable of providing enough light that the building code says. The building code says that you must have 0.2 lux in any emergency stairwell, and you've got to have 1 lux of light at the top tread of the stairs. Now, we can't measure that, but there is clearly a performance requirement that those lights need to meet by design. The second section is about schedules, evidence of identifying equipment locations, documents, and equipment as equipment schedules compared with locations on the baseline data. So this one here relates directly to equipment schedules or lists of the equipment and the locations of the equipment. These two areas here come in hand. If you do not have a plan, then you need an equipment schedule saying the location so that you can look at how many lights have been inspected, how many lights is the schedule of the plan saying there are, and confirming that they actually are there. And there may be sections of the building that you don't even know exist. So when you're doing your walk around, you need a plan and a schedule, or at least a plan or a schedule of some kind, in order to satisfy the performance requirement of that of this checklist. So I just want to make this note a bit bigger. So we're just justifying, and this statement's okay. We've confirmed with the asset register and visual inspection typically conducted from the floor to identify the emergency lights. That's not too bad. So I'm not happy with the references. The site vision is not a reference. This reference needs to be based on the performance. You're doing a survey, you are referencing these standards for that survey, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to visually inspect the light locations to ensure that there's enough lights in accordance with the reference or the performance requirement. The next one is a review of service records. So in all cases, we have to know something operates and functions. We need the service records to determine whether the system's actually working. A working system is obviously required for the system to perform correctly. And so these three sections here in grey are mandatory systems that need to take care of the plan, the schedule, and the test records. So we might as well go there. We've got some test records. And the records are quite good. They give us, the level that it's on, the location, what type of light it is. They're LED lights. Model, date, pass. Now, as soon as I see LED lights on a schedule, an LED light has a requirement called a light source life requirement. If you haven't done our emergency exit light course, then you really need to do it if you don't, for inspecting this, I believe. Even if you've gone through pathway 2, if you've gone through pathway 2, you'll need to do that emergency exit light course, because maintained LED lights have a requirement, essentially an expiry date or an LSL date. And that LSL date needs to be written on the schedule, because the system's not capable of performing if the LED light passes its light source life date, because the light will be operating at a brilliance that's not capable of performing the lux level that the performance requirement requires, and so therefore we can't pass it. And this test report is 2293.2, not 2293.1. So we're starting to see some good stuff here where we've got a standard, but it's the incorrect standard. Although I'll accept that, because we looked at 2293.1 and it did reference test reports. it did say that you need to test the system. So I'd be happy with that. This is not the detail I'm looking for here. I don't want to link here to the test reports because I've got a link up here to the service records. What I want here is a description of what you're looking for. If you're going to review test reports, what are you looking for? And I would say on here that I'm looking for evidence of a light source live, evidence that all the lights are working, and evidence that any lights that aren't working have been fixed. I also want to see, I would put in here that I want to look at the last, remember, we're looking at performance and we should be looking at whether there's any services that have been missed over the period of the year, or whether the lights have been maintained correctly over that period that we're assessing over. So that's over a full year. We're reviewing the light source live records. The no records exist. Is that critical? Yes, that's a fail. Okay, I agree with that. No LSL records there, and it's a fail. Baseline data, no baseline data. Is baseline data critical? Well, not really. Why? Because we're taking care of the baseline data up here. What's our baseline data? Well, we're saying the schedule's baseline data, the plans are baseline data, the service records are baseline data. What other baseline data do we need? Well, we don't have the plans. We've set up here that the plans are critical. Well, and it passes. That just doesn't make sense. There's no plans. So how can it pass? You may say it's not critical. It fails because there's no plans. And this is what I've done to compensate for that. So the idea of this section here is that we're developing an audit checklist to determine performance, and we must reference that against the performance requirements here. We must detail what we're doing to verify that performance requirement. We've got to determine whether that aspect of whatever we're doing is critical to it. Once again, the plans may not be critical to the performance of it. A system can be an emergency exit light system, or any system for that matter, can be capable of performing without having a plan. It can be capable of performing without having a schedule. I don't think it can be capable of performing without having a schedule and a plan, because nobody knows whether everything's been inspected and tested. Nobody knows whether everything is included on it. You can't tell you can't verify design if you don't have a schedule or a plan. So one of those two has to be critical, but not necessarily both of them. Luminance, we don't do a test luminance. Test lux by using a lux meter as per the NCC. Well, the NCC requires lumens, but it doesn't require to do a lux test. You can't do lux testing to determine performance with emergency lights. There is no way you can get a completely dark room and do a light lux test with only the emergency lights on and get a lux level that's true. There's no such thing as a really dark room. You cannot turn off artificial light, even the natural light. Natural light's always coming into rooms. You cannot determine performance of a system based on doing light lux testing. That's why it's critical that the amount of lights and the type of light is installed in the correct places in order to satisfy that design. Because realistically, most of the systems are installed by electricians. I'm guilty of that. I've installed it incorrectly. I didn't understand or read 2293.1, and so I've just put them in where I thought they needed to go. Now, does that satisfy design? Well, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. That's our job as an assessor to determine if that type of system's been installed, whether there's enough lights, whether they're the right type, based on AS 2293.1 and those pictures that I showed you before by design. Or we go back to the owner and say, no, it fails. I want you to go and get that design. But I don't believe that we have to do that if we can read a standard, and that's the purpose of the job that we do. We need to be capable of understanding the performance requirement, do a desktop audit on those on the requirements of the NCC and the standard, determine it, make a list of things that we believe are critical to performance, and things that may not be so critical to performance, and go and do a visual inspection of that site and review the records and the stuff that we need to review to determine performance. So I don't agree with this one. Here, we can't test the luminance, we can't expect it or require any service provider to do a lux testing. There's only one situation where lux testing is required. I'm not going to go through that. It's in your course notes for emergency exit lighting. So that one there is not valid. Survey test results, test report. Yes, it's critical. This system here mustn't be working. It fails. No records of the test results. No records of the test results with the isolation or circuit breaker off. Okay, so good. But this doesn't make sense. I'm doing a survey. Well, why can't I do that test myself? Because essentially, I think what this student's trying to say is, are the lights connected to the general lighting circuit? Are they associated with the general lighting circuit? Well, the test report's not going to tell you that. The test is going to tell you that. And you can turn the lighting circuit off and test that for yourself. So this would actually be a test that you would do. It would be a test in accordance with the requirements of 2293.1 and the NCC. And here the review would say, I need evidence that the lights are associated with the general lighting circuit in the area. Is it critical? Yes, it is. It's critical in performance because both the NCC and the 2293.1 says it is. Do I have that evidence? No, I don't. So therefore, no. So this system, based on the evidence that I'm seeing, is a fail. It should say up here that that's a fail. For some reason, I can't change that. What's it saying? It's saying it is not. Okay. But at very worst, if I go back to the building details, this system is not a pass. This system is a fail, based on the evidence that I have. Yeah. I can go and get this evidence fairly, but based on a desktop audit that I'm doing now, personally, I would need more information to pass this system. And I would need to do a heck of a lot more reference on I'd have to look at the system and do a lot more inspection and reference on 2293.1 to see whether those lights are in the correct places and are capable of providing the amount of light that they need and are associated with the general lighting circuit. Those are the things to me that are critical to performance. So overall, it's not too bad. But this is a very common thing, and this is one of the reasons that I'm picking on this one in particular. And you know, I've asked for permission to use this, and this is not an indictment of the person who did this work. This is fairly typical of the types of stuff that we're getting back, and that's why I'm putting it this way. And I believe it's because most of us are doing test and inspect work, and our headspace is that if something operates or functions, then it's capable of performing. And I just want, hopefully, to help you to understand that Section 6 is not about, it is about operation and function to some extent. We have to have evidence that something operates and functions, but that's only one thing. We need to be reviewing the performance requirement that's listed here. We need to be plucking out of that performance requirement what we believe are the critical aspects of performance. We need to be documenting them down here very clearly. Once we do that once, all the work happens on the first assessment. Once we do that once, we've got our system built. We've got our assessment checklist built, and we can just use that forevermore. And every time we go there, then the desktop audit is not such a big thing. All we've got to do is do the inspection. So hopefully this helps, guys. We'll do some more videos later on and try and improve our system for you. So hopefully this helps. Good luck.